out there? Welcome back to this week's adventure into cinema and strife and new movies and old movies and everything you guys enjoy about cinema. Fred, what do you got to say about that?
Well, about cinema in general, right now not a ton, but hey, there's been some good films. They're creeping out little by little, so always hopeful.
So rather than spinning it too far, we got two movies to regurgitate from last week's discussion that we both have watched now. I guess not much regurgitation. I guess that's the wrong word, but we got to talk about them a little bit. So I think that I'm going to start off. Let's start with Pig because I feel like Pig is by far the more what's the word I want to use for it? Special film. I think that everyone liked it a lot. I get why they did because the reality was, and I think that you'll agree with this, is it is definitely an actor, cinematographer, director's film. It is slow in a lot of ways, but it is very intentional, right? So I want to get your thoughts on it initially. We had talked very sparingly through chat, right, through texting back and forth about the fact that the opening of the film seemed almost too sterile for the idea for the rest of the film. Do you have any? What are your thoughts and perspectives on that? Because you're the one who recommended watching this, so yeah.
I did, and I knew it was a slow burn. I believe I warned that too, that it was a slow burn. But I think that what you have here is a movie that the trailer and what's in the movie is not revealed. What the story is actually about is almost something you have to experience. It's why I couldn't explain the movie too well when I recommended it, because the movie is about grief and dealing with grief. And I don't think I'm giving anything away by saying that, because the ending is about two men who finally come to deal with grief in their life. And there's a third also, but the two, the main points of the story. Again, I'm trying not to give too much away. And essentially, you have to go on a ride to experience that film. So that's all I can say. It's a journey. You're not supposed to know. You're supposed to go on the journey with them.
Well, I think we can talk about the technical aspects of the film, right? Certainly the director, the oddballness of that. I mean, a lot of the actors involved with this clearly are very talented character actors. I think one involved was literally a comedian out of the Portland area, if I'm correct, that was stellar in his performance in this. And I thought that was the highlight of the film, was that sequence where Nick Cage is engaging with a certain chef that he had worked with before. And I don't think I'm giving anything away with that, but that scene is brilliantly done, and I think it's a testament to some of the character actors in the film. I want to say that the cinematography is also top tier. I think that was almost to a detriment in some cases. The opening is way too sharp. It's way too sterile for the rest of the film. I know they started making changes throughout the film. In retrospect, knowing things about it, we can talk about some of the technicalities. This film was made in 20 days with a ensemble cast and a lot of great locations. It's clear that they were working their butts off to make this. And while I don't have the director's name in front of me at the moment, he went on to direct the prequel to A Quiet Place, which actually seems perfect, frankly, if you want my opinion. I mean, he knew what he was doing. He directed a lot of actors very well. I think that there was a lot of dead space in the film. So when you meant slow, my opinion is that this felt like a short film that he had an idea for and then made it way longer.
Oh, definitely. But it, again, I want to say something, but it would reveal too much of the ending.
It does give you closure, which a lot of movies
Yes.
screw up all the time. So it gives you solid closure at the end of the film. So if you want a reward, I may not get that, but you'll feel
something.
the movie did its job.
So I guess it's my turn. I might surprise you a little bit with what I'm about to say.
I hope so.
So the movie I had to watch was a movie that it's just one of those films kept slipping. I watch a lot of science fiction, but for some reason, Ex Machina, it was one of those films my friend and I kept saying, oh, we should watch this. We just never got to it. And that movie's from 2014. I gotta say, I was very disappointed in this.
Okay.
Some people that I watched it with were not crazy about it either. I think I was not as harsh as some of them were. I did not hate it, but I could really make this quick and say it gave me nothing new. And that was my biggest problem. I was ahead of the movie almost the whole time. And there were things that I just thought were downright dumb. I can't lie. I was Like, really? That's supposed to be shocking? I assumed that before I started watching the movie. And I'm trying not to give things away, but let's just say that it deals that he had other robots before her. I don't personally feel that's a spoiler.
No.
And he even mentions it to some degree, and like, you're supposed to be shocked by the scene where you see him with her. It's like, they're robots. I'm not shocked. I'm sorry. I don't feel anything here. So I think this is one of those movies that, unfortunately for me, was overlauded. People kept saying, "Oh, it's so good, it's so good," and then when I saw it, I was like, "Oh, this is like an episode of Outer Limits that's
It
like
absolutely is.
40 minutes longer."
Absolutely, you're way on there. I mean, it totally has that Outer Limits, probably more Outer Limits, not Twilight Zone, right? But it definitely has that same kind of. I think the same thing was true. Like I said with Pig, I feel like maybe they're in that way they're kind of similar. Where I feel like they are a short film, shorter entertainment thing expanded out in a lot of ways, and I think they are both actually like examples of directors getting their foot in the door, getting an opportunity to like do something cool. They do really good, and they got extra opportunities. I think that's true for Ex Machina as well. I don't remember. It's Ex Machina is quite a bit older than Pig at this point. I think
At
it's
this
10
point,
years.
yes.
Yeah, quite a bit older. But the reality was, I think Ex Machina also played into things that were unique, because back then the idea of AI, robots, and things, and all the stuff that's going on with the movie, which I don't think is giving anything away, was kind of fresh. It was new. There was a lot of films coming out with that concept of that core issue back then. And the visual effects for an independent film were stellar, because that was something that also at the time was more rare and more difficult. And the whole setting, vibe, and tone, and overall the actors' performances of what they were going through and what they were doing, I think was also a highlight. But again, I agree. I feel like that it's still something that would have made more sense in a shorter format.
It's interesting that in our picks for movies, the other movie you picked was oh no, the AI in the guy's head. Oh dear.
Upgrade.
Upgrade.
Yeah.
Thank you. I couldn't focus on the name for a second there. It deals in slightly similar themes, but what Upgrade did is it offered it in a new way. It offered it in a fresh way. I did guess the surprise at the end of that one too, but I didn't care, because I loved that ride, and that one was fresh. The camera work was different. This one did not give me that. But I will agree with you on one thing. The effects are amazing. For 2014, this was like a 14 or 15 million dollar movie. The effects on her are perfect. Like, they're perfect. You can't tell. There's maybe if I saw it on the big screen in a theater, maybe I could have seen it more. But I gotta say, I was blown away by her look. Like, you believed this was a machine, and the movie succeeds there more than anything else.
I think that in general that's probably true. I think that that's an issue with a lot of independent films, lower budget films, is sometimes I think if we're hitting on a core element, even with them being very different and just like very far away from each other time wise and visual and effects wise, right? One's very effects driven, let's be fair, and one is very character driven, but they're kind of similar in the fact that I think that if you enjoy a movie that's independently made with a micro budget with a talented cast, you're probably going to enjoy both of them. You might have a favorite, but you probably won't waste your time if you like a good movie in general, like as far as something that's complete story wise. That being said, we can jump into the future of technology, I guess, or we're going to go into some crazy stuff here, and we're going to talk about do we just want to go straight to the Fast and Furious conversation and branch it off from there? I think
You lead the way. This is the point. What are we here to talk about? What is the focus for you?
so. So an important highlight, I think, in technology and history and film is that we have an overarching story of where, and again, this kind of highlights directly from Ex Machina, where technology has started to help you have the ability to do things you couldn't do before. From creating dinosaurs to resurrecting the dead. I guess you just say that in general, because it's kind of accurate across the board. To creating things in fantastic landscapes and events and scenarios that just couldn't happen otherwise. I think that we've reached a point in society where we're going to start seeing an evolution of technology hitting ahead. So if we want to go backtrack, so how do you find the right crossover point to use technology to tell a good story? Where do you choose to make that work? We've been happy in the past to use it at all costs, right? If you want to look at Terminator, Jurassic Park, even movies later, if you look at what we did, even with the Roland Emmerich Godzilla, even, right? Up until that time, Godzilla had been always a guy in a suit. I'm just using it as a good example. But the reality is that you have a scenario where we've slowly evolved technology into our filmmaking era, where we're making things happen out of close to thin air, and we're bringing things into reality that otherwise don't physically exist at all, unless it's printed to film or to a hard drive somewhere. And in Fast and Furious, we saw the resurrection of a character who died during that process, Paul Walker, and they were able to accomplish that in a way in which was revolutionary at the time, and I think greatly appreciated. And for me personally, that movie did a good job considering its constraints, and I feel bad for all the people who had to deal with that scenario. I feel obviously bad for Paul Walker's family and the loss and all. It was very tragic and unfortunate, but I am also equally thrilled, and I think that most people would be, that his last work got completed through any means necessary. And I feel like a lot of actors would prefer that. I know in the past we've had actors get lost and they had to do crazy things to make it work, not technology, right? Crow comes to mind, obviously, and that worked out, and and fans are happy because of it, and generally public's happy with it. So my question is, and Fred, I'm curious to see where your thought is, like, where do we draw the line, and what technology advances do you think got us here, and how do we evolve from that, and what movies really stand out as like being a great example of what we've accomplished and things we shouldn't do?
Okay, that's a very wide breadth there, so I'll do my best to cover as best I can. Starting first with Paul, look, I think as far as consent is concerned, in this particular case, I think you have the best of all worlds. Paul was working on the movie, so obviously you could assume consent to finish the movie. And they had the family's approval, which I think is important too, so much so that his own brother was playing in the scenes that he was not in, and then they replaced his face.
I think both his brothers helped, actually.
I don't know that. I know one brother did for sure. I don't know about the other. So you might be right. I'm not going to dispute it. But we know that there's consent across the board. Where I would say, like, I think what made people uncomfortable, like, I don't think people were as uncomfortable with that one, but we're going to go back in time for a moment. And I think people have forgotten this. But the idea, not so much the technology, but the idea of this goes back to it was either 92 or 93. I don't know if you remember this, but there was a Diet Coke commercial that featured Humphrey Bogart, Louis Armstrong, and James Cagney, and they're helping to shill Diet Coke. And then in 96, maybe more egregious, and I remember a lot of people really not being happy about this, Coors Beer did 2 ads with John Wayne. Do you remember those?
I mean, I remember things even before that, in theory. I mean,
well, I do, but I'm using those as the example. Do you remember, like, the upheaval?
I don't remember those vividly. No, I do remember. I remember the commercial being questionable, but I don't remember I didn't understand. I was younger then, obviously. I don't remember the visceral why, like why it mattered.
Well, there's no consent. There's no consent. Now, I don't know. I didn't get too deep into did the estates say it was okay. I know Humphrey Bogart, for instance, had an estate. I would assume they had to sign off on that. But I don't know about Louis Armstrong, James Cagney, and I would again assume John Wayne's estate would have to sign off. But obviously none of these people could have offered it, and I'm sure there was somebody in the family, if they had surviving family, that wasn't too happy. Okay? Now you're dealing with a grayer area. Does the estate have control? And this isn't even AI yet, right? This is just the idea. You've brought the dead back to sell your product.
They used modified clips, right? They took existing footage back
and
then,
re-edited them.
And
correct.
re-edited it, yeah.
And it's the idea. It's the same idea of what we're getting into here, but because now we could jump back ahead, and the one that comes to my head right off the bat is Peter Cushing in Rogue One. So who approved of that? Because it certainly wasn't Peter. He wasn't working on Rogue One when he died.
Was terrible.
And it looked bad. Yeah, it didn't
really
look
bad.
Good. He looked like a walking corpse. It was really scary stuff.
Everyone supported the idea of recasting. And the guy that played his role, that his face was replaced with Cushing, he would have been fine.
Yeah.
Just have him play Cushing. It's his voice. It's not Cushing's voice. They couldn't do that at the time. It didn't exist, but they just recast him. I think that's the biggest problem, biggest fallacy with a lot of this stuff, right? Is they don't just recast an actor. Now it's different. if it's satire, I want to argue that the stuff they did, I think, and to go back in time slave, you mentioned the use cases like Last Action Heroes satire of bringing back dead people for cameos. I think is satire, right? That's a different scenario. But when you're bringing them back to like definitively play the role that they're supposed to play, and or replace them, and or have someone act over them in some cases, it seems like you're doing a disservice to not only the past actor, but you're doing a disservice to the actor trying to portray them, right? You might as well have the person that is doing their best to give them a nod of approval and say, "Hey, you were amazing. I'm going to take it from here. You've done great work." They should get the chance to do that. I think that Disney just messed it up. So,
Well, I mean, it raises a good question because, is it okay with Last Action Hero? I mean, or is it because we like the movie and it entertained us? Back when the Coors Beer ad hit and people did not like that. I remember that vividly. People were not crazy about those two ads. But if you're entertained and you like it, does it suddenly make it okay? Like, that's a good question. And to use maybe a weirder example, people might have forgotten about this, but James Dean, his likeness rights were sold by his estate and or his family. Again, I don't know if the family was in charge of this, by the way. Just know that his estate sold the rights to his likeness for a movie, and it was a war film. And they were actually making this war film starring James Dean. The kickback to it was so ferocious that they bailed on it. They stopped making the movie. They just dropped it. I think it was called Finding Jack. I have some notes here. The thing is that they are now back to using James Dean in another project. It's a science fiction film with a digitally recreated James Dean. Now, if I read it correctly, it sounds like the idea he is an AI in the movie. So it's not actually like, oh, this is James Dean. It's like an AI James Dean.
that's
So
a
they're
cop
trying
out.
to, yeah, exactly. They're trying to like get that. And it was a company called CMG Worldwide, which it says represents the rights to James Dean's image.
Yeah.
So you go, well, who is CMG? Did James sign his likeness? Right? Because I doubt that highly from when he died. So there is a lot of, not to harp on this one idea over and over, just that's a little creepy, and it makes you wonder, like, if this is where we're at now. I think people always fear, where does it go from there? Because there have been ads in other countries that have used CG recreation, AI recreations of politicians, and
Bruce
had
Willis.
them doing, well, that's a different thing. I'm talking like these were negative ads showing politicians doing evil things that they believe they do. And it's like, well, whoa, whoa, whoa. Now that's an even scarier thought. This isn't Peter Cushing, on the Death Star in a movie he was once in. This is like real life people in real life scenarios. And I think most would agree that's definitely where the line comes down. Like, you're talking about human beings, real people in real life scenarios. These aren't characters anymore. There's another thing. I'll just throw this out there real quick. James Earl Jones signed his likeness rights for Darth Vader. Well, actually his voice.
His voice, yeah.
His voice for Fortnite. And it's an AI that is in Fortnite talking like Darth Vader. And people were like,
that's
well,
gone great.
yeah, how do you feel about that? And it's like, well, James Earl signed off on it. He said, I'm cool with it. He wants to be the voice of Darth Vader forever. He said it. He thinks that it's important that he remains that voice. So now you got a new wrinkle. What about somebody that wants to be this thing for the rest of their life?
I think that's different, right? I mean, you have someone like that says it for sure, but I don't think it's fair that they're leveraging it in a way that allows a user, which we've seen that recently, at least in current day. This is May 22nd, 2025. We're recording this. We should probably mention that, but we've seen it be abused in a way in which he probably wouldn't approve. And that certainly
Who wouldn't approve? Because he signed off on this. I don't know.
Well, people can imitate his voice. They're like
well, they have imitated his voice. So
yeah, well, they're ripping off his voice. It's being converted to his voice, and they're saying things he probably wouldn't approve of. I'll say that much. But that's different than like his voice being officially approved for a movie or a film that's in canon. And I don't know what the agreement looks like, but I don't think that he'd agree or like what they're doing with Fortnite. That's just...
You mean that in the video game this is a thing that people were trying to trick
Yeah.
the AI
Yeah.
into saying something.
So let's go back to, again, I'm going to use Last Action Hero briefly here just to mention it, but I think that the key is when you love someone or you're doing something conveyance of a appreciation of their existence. I think it's a big difference between like trying to make them be the same character and show up on screen forever, and they're going to be the same existence, right? Like replicating like Cushing, for example. And then the difference between like Last Action Hero that put them on there simply to say, hey, somewhere in reality, in some movie, somewhere, this character who's beloved is still doing the thing they've always done, and they'll do that. They'll do that as long as forever, right? I think that that's an appreciation that's lost a lot with the new technology. We want to make them do something that is definitive, official, legitimate, and do it through believe that it's actually them. Whereas other technologies in the past, for leveraging them in some scenarios, they were just there as a homage, an appreciation, like a nod, not something to be taken advantage of. And I think that maybe that's the biggest part. If we feel like an actor or the performance or their characters being manipulated in a way that they disagree with, in a way that they potentially could never approve of, that would be negative towards them or potentially questionable, let's just say, that's not fair. But if you just give an homage to that, like if for example, they simply had a Peter Cushing character exist for a moment, right, in the film, for as a nod with that likeness, that would have been cool. But having him be like a prominent character and talk and all sorts of stuff is probably not a good idea.
Well, you could even argue, was that character even necessary for Rogue One? I mean, honestly, it was a gimmick. Yeah. You could have had any other Empire official.
Just recast him if you really need it.
Yeah,
for continuity. Yeah.
I don't know if you saw it, but there was a Three Stooges movie that they had, three actors being the Stooges in playing characters, basically, and it was so weird that it was almost worked. Will Sasso was Curly, it was just a very strange.
You mean the movie, the more recent remake?
That's what I'm talking about, where they literally were playing
but
actors.
They recasted them, so I think it's
yes.
I think that's the right. I'm just off here right here, but I feel like that was the idea where it
is the idea.
Yeah, that's the idea. What you should do.
But I'm saying nobody, there was some debating, was that appropriate? Because you're not the Three Stooges, is what I heard a lot. And what you're trying to recreate was literally who and what they were as entertainers. So weirdly, I think people were kind of offended more at that idea. Not that you were playing dead people that were long gone, but it's like now you're going to try to recreate what they were. I think it was Red Letter Media. Maybe I'm wrong.
We're going to talk about that.
But they brought up, they brought up, it'd be like playing not Jim Varney in a movie, but like someone playing Ernest P. Worrell and trying to act like Jim Varney. And it was like, it's when you start breaking it down that way, it'd be like if you make a modern Columbo movie, it's one thing you hire another actor, let's say Walton Goggins, okay? And you hire Walton Goggins to play Columbo, and he plays it like Walton Goggins would. But it'd be a whole other if you hired somebody and said, act just like Peter Falk.
Well, so I am loosely, I'll use that word, friends with an actor named Billy Crank. Maybe you know who he is or don't know who he is. But he has been a guy that's been heavily pushing to do a Son of Ernest. He's a guy that's very good at being earnest. He's much younger. If you have the right person, the right love for a character, and you have someone that's in there that's really committed to doing it, I don't see why not bring them back or let them do their version, as long as it's honest and legitimate. It's not like a cheap take. And I think that in some cases, definitely in Billy's case, Billy Crank's case, like his performance is freaking fantastic. Like he gets it, he loves it, he nails it.
But you said he's Son of Ernest. He's not Ernest.
His goal was to make something called Son of Ernest, right? So he didn't want to try to be Ernest, but he wanted to like have the next step. But he's so good. Like
it's less offensive.
Well, it's less offensive, but it makes more sense continuity-wise.
It does make more sense. And look, I'm not saying I'm offended by, just for clarity, I'm not offended by like the Three Stooges movie. Yeah. I was just raising, because we're looking at the idea of hiring an actor or an actress to play someone who's dead. Okay, they're dead. You can't be this character anymore, so you hire someone else. Versus the idea of, well, you still have to put a physical being there and then cover them up with AI schmutz.
Yep.
And it's like if you have full approval of the estate, well, Carrie Fisher in the same movie, Carrie Fisher's estate and family said, we're okay with you doing AI Princess Leia in Rogue One, which is different than the Peter Cushing thing. And it begs, like, if you're going to be okay with this, what makes this one okay and this one not? If we're going to be open and honest in the discussion, I think you do have to kind of answer that question. And I meant this thing I wrote down as kind of like an ending thought, but I think it fits better here. When you talk about AI, and they say, oh, there's the uncanny valley. We know that. Look at Paul Walker and Fast 7. It's weird. They weren't quite there yet. Peter Cushing, that one was terrifying. And it's not there, but we know it's going to get there, and it's getting better and better and better. Like every week I'm seeing amazing changes, and people are arguing about, is this moral? Is this not moral? Like, it doesn't matter. It's going to happen. Hollywood's going to use it, and it will get better and better. That's not the question. The real question isn't, will it get better? It will. We know that. It's here. It will be used. The question is, will we want it? Will audiences pay to see it? And I think in there lies the nuance that Hollywood's going to find out. Are they going to get away with this? Now, with Paul Walker, we had the approval, and people agreed. Well, Paul was making the movie. Of course he agrees with finishing it. The family was okay with it. Carrie Fisher was okay with it for Rogue One, or her family. But Peter Cushing was not. He had no involvement, no idea. He was long gone. There is a valley there. So will people go to see movies where you are essentially resurrecting the dead, or just creating almost everything with AI?
I think that they're very different, right? I think that the technology versus like an actor's performance that's legitimate and real. So I think that if you're talking about like let's say the Three Stooges example versus like having them play and then replace their faces and bodies and something.
And it's the Three Stooges, the original Mo Howard, and
exactly. I think there's a big difference, right? So
there is.
If you have the performances that are there, it can work. If they wanted to do in the movie like an homage to the original Stooges and have them be there for a moment or something weird, or be their parents, something bizarre, you know what I mean? Like, if they did some sort of like a nod to them, that'd be fine. Audiences would love that. I think when you try to replace the actor with the technology completely, it just doesn't work, and then people don't like that.
And it's how you use them is also going to be
very important.
Very important, because, like, let's say you had, and I'm making this up off the cuff, but what if Lauren Bacall was in a movie, a modern movie, AI, R-rated, and you featured her nude?
That would be crazy.
And at some point this line is going to be crossed. You just know it will be. There's no way that won't happen. You'll have Marilyn Monroe or some famous...
It's already been happening, just not mainstream.
Well, the deep fakes, that's a whole other argument. Like porn, political ads, oh my gosh, it's out there. But how long until someone says, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we had Maureen O'Hara, who was known for a fairly clean image, or a Sandy Duncan or whomever, and now, she's got a potty mouth and she's cussing and swearing, shoots a baby, does a full nude scene. Like, that's going to be more, I think, when you're really going to see people go crazy on it.
Yeah, look at the history, though. I mean, we've seen people get attached to non-physical characters, like actors and stuff. I mean, not saying it's possible or impossible, but I could see a day, I guess, because we even have, so let's say we have Jurassic Park, right? I'm going to go back to that. This kind of a conversation originated from that craziness, but we have a T-Rex that existed in Jurassic Park. It had a physical robot form, in theory, in the back scene, and we had not AI, we had CGI back then, right? And now today, audiences through another 3 films have had continued love for that CGI character that's deemed that character, right? I mean, it's a little bit weird. Even I personally, like, this is that T-Rex, because they tell me it's that T-Rex. You can't really identify it per se, et cetera, et cetera. It gets a little bit goofy or weird. But my opinion is that there might be a day where we don't have, where actors likenesses are synthesized. I mean, we get past the ability for an individual to even hold that role anymore. I think we're gonna get to that point at some juncture where a studio is gonna create a star that's not real, and that's gonna be the star, and people are gonna want that character. I don't think that's significantly different than like a novel or a book or any story, right? Because inevitably you fall in love with the character and who that character is and their performance. In a lot of ways, you like the person playing them today, but honestly, in a lot of ways, you would prefer them to be played by the best version of themselves or be their universally best self forever. That's a weird statement because if you look at like a written text, right, like novels, etc., there is no physical person playing a character. And as Hollywood continues to move more towards pre-existing or existing creative endeavors, let's take, James Bond even. In theory, you'll get to a point where maybe you don't care anymore that it's not real, but you just like James Bond. You just want the best James Bond. So, and maybe the audience, while the story could be variable or tactile, could pick who they want to be James Bond in this movie. Wouldn't that be weird? Do you want Sean Connery? Do you want Henry Cavill? Do you want Idris Elba? You could have whoever you want. That would be weird. But I feel like maybe society is going to evolve to that point, or create your own. You could be James Bond. That would be weird equally, right? But in theory, I feel like we're going to evolve to that point. I hate to say that, and that
I don't think that's unfair, though.
Yeah.
I don't think that's an unfair statement. I don't even know if that's the argument people make.
No, not an argument. Just the thought that the evolution of where we're going is my statement. Yeah.
It seems like the number one argument to me, and this is where things really get muddy, and I hope people understand we're debating this. It's not a we want this or this is what should happen. It's
a conversation.
It's a conversation because I'm about to raise what I hear number one, and that is the idea of putting artists out of work, putting illustrators out of work, putting other actors out of work. And again, I think you raised an interesting point. You said that if you create a character, and I'm assuming you meant an original character that never existed before, and they're completely AI, and what if audiences liked them? I believe that's what you meant.
I'm just saying, like, as far as like in general, like a character could be any role. Just like it could be an actor. An actor could play James Bond. An actor could play Ian Malcolm. Let's say you could create an AI thing that could do roles. Is my thought. Yeah.
Okay. Well, then I'll raise a different point that if it's an original, there are AI J-pop stars in Japan. I don't think there's a lot. I think there's maybe one, maybe two. But we're starting to see you can't be offended because no one's losing a job because no one had the job to begin with. In fact, there's probably more work because it takes more to run those computers and those systems and keep the software running and the lighting, you know what I mean, as they do a holographic projection. So that's a whole other thing again. But we have seen artists lose jobs already. If you look at what Jurassic Park brought about, it brought about something that changed the game completely. Although, Spielberg at least rehired Phil Tippett, the minute, because they were working on stop motion dinosaurs on that film. And then they saw that, that animatic of the dinosaur running. They had that, and everybody in the room went, they'd never seen anything like that. And Phil was almost instantly out of a job. But Spielberg being Spielberg...
I guess we're extinct, right? Yeah.
Yeah, but Spielberg rehired him to work with them, and he actually created a model called the DID, the DID. I think it was just dinosaur input device, where he would move it, and it would capture a frame inside the computer.
So brilliant. That's
brilliant.
Yeah.
And like the guys, what was his name? Steve Spaz Williams and Mark Dippy. Was it pronounced Dippy? Anyway, they were the guys that really, started this whole thing and put, guys like Phil Tippett immediately out of work. But bigger than that, let's look at Pixar, because people talk about Jurassic Park for the CG, but man, Pixar came along. They did all their animation in computers. That was the beginning of the end for Disney animation. Like, that was it. And I'm not saying there's no animation done anywhere, because Japan still utilizes it, and there's a little bit here. You can find it on YouTube. But it put all those people out of work, and nobody was raising the same argument.
They were afraid, but they weren't. They thought they would create new jobs, and it didn't exactly do what they thought.
Well, it did for the animators. It lost them their jobs. Yeah, that was... But I agree with what you're saying. I mean, it created new jobs.
Well, I think that they couldn't. I still feel bad about that, right? Because I think the performances we saw with the CGI, as far as the overall animations we got from that era, from Jurassic Park, I don't think we've seen better actual animation in a CGI character since then, to be fair. So I think there's a whole, that's where things get weird, because I think the in computer is just never going to be the same as having someone tactically involved, like interact
No,
with something.
I,
Yeah.
I want hand drawn. I prefer hand drawn animation. I miss it. It's I couple of my favorite movies are Watership Down, Secret of Nim. They're beautiful. They're beautiful movies, and I haven't seen anything like that come out of Pixar. I don't hate Pixar, but I don't understand why these two things can't coexist. And I think as we go forward with AI, it's going to be a similar argument. And it's like, I am not 100% against AI, but I'm not crazy about it either.
So let me jump into a thought there with regards to AI specifically, because I with personal experience. So for me personally, technologically, a user who can make mistakes organically for something that is a creative endeavor is going to be way better always than someone that can like follow an algorithm and be math.
I
Right?
agree with that.
Yeah.
I
So that's my summarization of my point. So
sometimes, it's like Pete Townsend, where he had the stutter in the song, right? But it wasn't intentional. It was just he had a stutter, and when they were doing the generation, he just started to stutter, and now that stutter is as famous as the song itself.
it's character.
It's character, and an AI more than likely wouldn't do that. It wouldn't produce that. Those little flaws that exist in movies, but I think there are good uses for it. But at the end of the day, I'm always going to be for the for the human factor. Exactly what you just said. There's something an algorithm cannot do that a human can do. And if it can do it, all it's doing is repeating something a human being already did.
So let me be clear with that to support that. So I think that objectively we want AI to be correct, right? We don't want it to be wrong. So I think fundamentally, from an art perspective, we want to imbue humanity's imperfections into it sometimes. And if you let AI try to create imperfections, we don't want to imbue imperfections into AI. We want AI to be perfect. So we don't want it to make mistakes or do the wrong thing. That would be bad. Historically, we've seen that, and even in cinema. Look at AI across the board, right? And when AI is imperfect or problematic or difficult, it causes major problems. We don't want that. So by default, it makes sense that it could be a supporting tool for the creative endeavors, but it should not be the tool, and it cannot finish the project or create the project into perfection, because it would be just wrong.
Well, there's a difference in because what you're talking about is precision, and
Yeah.
it's like if you have a doctor and they're a surgeon, you want precision. You want them to be perfect, not make an accidental, quirky thing. We're literally talking about art, and in AI tends to go for the precision. That's the way it's designed, because if you introduced imperfections into its programming, who knows what the heck you.
We don't want it to crash the car. We don't want it to launch nuclear
Exactly.
weapons on accident.
Exactly.
We want it to be perfect. And I think that's the one fallacy in the whole thing, is that people are afraid of AI for all the wrong reasons in some ways, because the reality is that a stupid AI is more dangerous than a smart AI, and the stupid AI is going to be better at doing the things that we probably want it to do, but we don't want it to be stupid, because it doesn't take a smart AI to cause a problem in general, right? We want smart AIs to do definitively correct things, and that by default is not going to be congruent with art. It's just not going to make sense in the long term. Eventually, we'll get to the point where the output from some of these things that we call creative, in quotes, around AI, it's just going to be like hot garbage, because it's just going to be the same thing over and over again. It's going to be just perfect, and perfect is not the best. Perfect's ideal for war or chaos or whatever. You don't want a dumb AI to be in control of nuclear weapons. That'd be stupid, right?
Well, you're going into the real world. I was talking art. Just for, I mean, obviously,
It crosses
Yeah.
all barriers, I guess.
I
I'm
hope
just
AI
saying,
never has like access to nuclear weapon launching capabilities. I believe they made a movie about that some time ago. Something
Yeah.
Terminator or something.
Oh, I think about war games. I'm just joking. We can go further back if you want to, but the reality is, I think technology.
AI goes all the way back to 1952 when
Yeah.
they created a computer checker game.
Well, we could talk about the one where the American AI becomes friends with the Russian or Soviet Union AI, and they take over the. Anyway, we can go on forever, but the
And
reality
then they
is,
met.
Anyway, so here we are. We're right into our nesting hour, so into our recommendations for next films to watch, I think, right?
I guess what I was going to recommend, I became a little self-conscious over my recommendations from last time, because I was like, did I go a little too odd, maybe? And I was just thinking, could I just recommend, a regular movie that people might enjoy and can seek out? So I thought I'll play it safe here, and I'll even go for something I wouldn't normally go for. I'm going to recommend a movie called Togo, and it's a Disney movie, which I don't recommend too much in that arena anymore. It's from 2019, and it stars William Dafoe. And the logline right off IMDb is the story of Togo, the sled dog who led the 1925 serum run despite being considered too small and weak to lead such an intense race. I gotta tell you, this movie just touched my heart. And sadly, it got buried. Isn't this the way it always is? Disney made another movie that, by the way, both these films use CGI because they didn't want to endanger the dogs. This one uses it better and sparingly, whereas the other one was Call of the Wild with Harrison Ford. And that one got so much attention. Plus, it went to the theater that this film just disappeared. And it only played on Disney Plus, which is why a lot of people didn't see it. But I gotta tell you, this movie is really, really worth hunting down. It's got heart. It's got adventure, and it's about a real thing that happened. And if you've ever heard of the movie, it was an animated film called Balto. It's about the same exact, they're trying to get the serum to these people that are dying. Balto did not run the same length or danger that Togo did. Balto got famous because he ran the last part of it. So he's the one that came into town where all these reporters were, basically. And Togo was the dog that made the most dangerous part of the run with its owner. And I gotta tell you, check this movie out. It is a heartwarming adventure.
Wow, that is a heartening film. I've never watched it, so I'm gonna watch it and we can talk about it.
Certainly. I think you'd like this one. This is not Pig. I promise you.
No. It seems like it. Willem Dafoe. I mean, seriously. I mean, that's a highlight. So I'm going to recommend. It makes my job easy, but I'm going to recommend an opposite film that is very real, very natural, but technology driven, but also Disney related. I think that's fair because you inspired me to make. And you have definitely seen this film. I'm sorry. But I'm going to recommend the original 20,000 Leagues from 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea from Disney. Might as well recommend that because
one of my all-time favorites.
It is a classic. Definitively has technology of what people thought back then, but I think it is all. There's no CGI in that movie, right? There's no fake anything in that, right?
Well, no CG existed at that time. That was all hand done.
Yeah, so I think that people will enjoy that to recommend, especially if you have children and stuff like that. I think that both these films would be good with children. It sounds like so. It almost sounds like a great evening. I mean, 20,000 Leagues is a highlight. You have some fantastic actors in it, and I feel like a lot of our generation probably hasn't seen it in reality.
Yeah, I completely agree. I don't think a lot of people have seen some of those older classic Disney films. Then again, I tried showing some to some nephews and nieces once, and they were extremely bored. But man, I think 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea is a great pick. So, Darren, why don't you take us home?
Thank you all for coming and hanging out with us. I think we've had a fantastic evening. We'll be back here again with another one. If you guys have recommendations, leave them down in the comments below. We'll happily watch your film and tell you how bad or good it is. If you make a really bad recommendation like Shakma, we will strangle you. So, yeah.
Well, to a degree, let's be fair. If we get a bunch of recommendations, we can't watch them all. But we'll try. I don't want to get caught in a legal battle like Red Bull gives you wings, okay? Hey, they said they'd watch it. And I'm like, I'm done with the Twilight films. No, I'm not going back.
We'll watch it anyway. Yeah, we'll try.
Well, hey, everybody, thanks for joining us as always. And we hope you'll continue to join us as we grow with the show and we learn what we're doing. We're having fun, and it's always fun to try to bring these conversations and these new movies to you. So we hope you're enjoying it as well. Please don't be afraid to make a comment. We're not going to mock you or make it. We both have weird tastes in movies at times, so feel free. Just open up. But till next time, we don't know what we're going to talk about, but we hope you enjoy it, and we hope you enjoyed this episode. So till next time, God bless.
Have a great night, y'all.